AD 301, Diocletian and the other soldier emperors faced serious economic challenges: inflation, coin debasement, difficulty raising revenue, problems that they sought to solve by means of issuing commands. And so we have the Edict on Maximum Prices, one of the most ambitious economic experiments in all of ancient history. The edict was a desperate attempt to tackle a crippling economic crisis that had plagued the Roman Empire for decades: hyperinflation. And Diocletian and the other emperors believed that the best way to control it was by issuing orders to every single Roman citizen, millions of them, forbidding them from charging prices higher than those listed on the edict and threatening capital punishment for anyone who dared disobey. What prompted this edict? How did Diocletian sell it to the Roman people? And what were the consequences? We will answer these questions on today's episode of the Pax Romana podcast. Episode 81, Diocletian's Edict on Maximum Prices. Folks, before we get started, I just wanted to mention that in the show notes of this podcast, you will find links to, 1, my YouTube channel, 2, my most recent book, Pax Romana, The Plague That Shook the Roman World, which was published by Princeton University Press. It's all about the Antonine Plague, and I put a lot of research into that book. I hope that you will pick it up in some form and enjoy it. And then lastly, there is a link to donate if you enjoy the podcast and wish to send a small amount of money my way as a thank you. I want to give you that opportunity to do that in the show notes. All right, let's get to today's episode. In the last episode, we talked about how Diocletian and his partners in the Tetrarchy, these 3 other men that were ruling the Roman Empire as warlords, they were dealing with an amazing amount of challenges. For decades now, there had been political instability with emperors coming and going, sometimes multiple emperors in a single year, emperors being assassinated, coups, civil wars, general chaos. And then there were the external threats, barbarian tribes like Goths, Alemanni, even the Persians in the east at times were invading, disrupting trade, stretching the military thin, pummeling Roman borders. And then to pay for all of this and to deal with the demands of Rome's bloated military, the emperors had for decades diluted the silver content of Roman coins and reduced the weight of the gold coins, ultimately flooding the Roman economy with poor quality, devalued currency. Unsurprisingly, these actions triggered rampant inflation. How bad was this inflation? Well, it's tough to tell, but if we look at prices in Egyptian papyri over the course of about 300 years of Roman history, and we look at staple goods like grain, oil, and wine, from the time of Augustus to the time of Diocletian, prices go up about 70-fold. And most of that inflation happened in the 50 years or so before Diocletian took over. Despite the Tetrarchy's success in some areas, especially in defending Roman borders and preventing usurpations, we saw how that worked in the last couple of episodes of this podcast, the Tetrarchs continued to have trouble on the economic and social front. As we saw last time, Diocletian attempted to address revenue shortages with a ruthless tax system, dividing the Roman Empire up into smaller and smaller provinces, freezing employment, forcing peasants to stay on the land which they were working, and forbidding them from leaving that land. All of this was at least partly motivated by an attempt to squeeze every bit of tax out of the Roman Empire. But there was also the ongoing problem with price inflation. The government was already undertaking huge expenditures for maintaining an army of 500,000 people or more. They had to pay, of course, for all of these bureaucrats and assessors and the various kinds of handouts of oil, wine, pork, and grain. And then it didn't help that because of decades of inflation, the coinage issued by the emperors was received with some skepticism and distrust. So in 301 AD, Diocletian and his emperors, in order to solve the problem of runaway costs, issued an edict that was unprecedented in Roman history. This edict on maximum prices set price caps on over 1,000 goods and services, from bread to silk to various wages. The edict was carved in stone slabs in both Greek and Latin, posted across the empire, and even to this day, fragments of this edict have been found in both the west and eastern parts of the former Roman Empire. In economic terms, this edict represents a series of price ceilings. And what is a price ceiling? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. It is an upper limit on the price that can be charged for a particular good and service. And even in the modern context, these kinds of actions tend to be popular in times of inflation. I could give you two examples. Natural disasters. When a region, say the southern United States, suffers a hurricane, there will inevitably be rises around that time or just after in the price of, say, gas and water. Maybe a few weeks earlier, gas was $3 a gallon, and now, immediately after a hurricane or just before a hurricane, gas is $7, $8, $9, $20 a gallon even. And this kind of thing makes people pretty upset. They feel like they are being taken advantage of, and so many southern states have anti-price gouging laws in order to prevent prices of gas, water, and other essential goods going up above some average based on what prices were before the natural disaster. Another time that we've seen these kinds of price ceilings was during the last period of inflation, not in 2020, 2021, but in the early 1970s, during the era of stagflation. In fact, I want to play you a clip of what then U.S. President Richard Nixon had to say about prices at that time and his edict freezing wages and prices. Have a listen.
The second indispensable element of the new prosperity is to stop the rise in the cost of living. Inflation robs every American, every one of you. The time has come for decisive action, action that will break the vicious circle of spiraling prices and costs. I am today ordering a freeze on all prices and wages throughout the United States for a period of 90 days. We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world. In the past 7 years, there's been an average of one international monetary crisis every year. Now, who gains from these crises? Not the working man, not the investor, not the real producers of wealth. The gainers are the international money speculators. Because they thrive on crises, they help to create them. In recent weeks, the speculators have been waging an all-out war on the American dollar.
All right, so that was Richard Nixon. And the reason I played that is because I want you to notice the type of rhetoric that Richard Nixon used and the type of rhetoric that we see in Diocletian's own Price Edict. And we know what Diocletian had to say because the preamble of the edict, also published along with the list of prices, is preserved. And it gives us interesting insight into Diocletian's mindset. He doesn't, in fact, say anything about currency debasement or structural issues in the Roman economy, but rather he blames greed. Quote, "If the excesses perpetrated by persons of unlimited and frenzied avarice could be checked by some self-restraint, this avarice, which rushes for gain and profit with no thought for mankind, but the only desire of these uncontrolled madmen is to have no thought for the common need. Among the unscrupulous, the immoderate, and the avaricious, it is considered almost a creed to desist from plundering the wealth of all only when necessity compels them." That's the preamble on the Edict of Maximum Prices, 301 AD. What is Diocletian saying? Well, he's saying something quite similar to Richard Nixon, or what people in a southern state might say when they see gases go up around the time of a hurricane. The reason that this is happening is greed. There is just a sudden outpouring of greed. There wasn't greed a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, or a few years ago, and then suddenly everybody decided to be greedy. That, of course, is, if I may be so frank, a ridiculous explanation for why prices go up. Are there people who love to profit in times of crisis? Absolutely. But the main reason that prices go up around the time of, say, a hurricane is because people want to get out of Dodge, and demand suddenly surges through the roof. And in order to ration the gas during a time of high demand, prices have to go up, or people will get way more gas than they need. The reason why gas actually needs to be $10, $15, $20 a gallon is so that people only get what they need to deal with the crisis. Similarly, with Richard Nixon, the reason that prices were going up was not because of some sudden outburst of speculation and greed. In reality, the U.S. Federal Reserve, which is responsible for controlling the money supply, kept interest rates low and expanded the monetary supply by about 7 to 10% annually each year from 1965 to 1970. In fact, in one of the clips I just played you, Nixon was building up to justify taking the U.S. dollar off its last vestiges of the gold standard, no longer allowing foreign countries to exchange the dollars that they held for gold. And that, of course, made inflation worse. The government had printed all of that money in large part to finance the Great Society programs, Vietnam War spending, and to attempt to stimulate economic growth. But inflation was the price that was paid for all of that monetary expansion. There is no such thing as a free lunch. It had very little to do with spontaneous greed. Rather, the system was simply responding to this new flood of unbacked paper money. Well, so too under Diocletian. Diocletian, in the preamble, has nothing to say about the fact that he and his co-emperors, as well as his predecessors, had so debased and devalued the Roman currency that nobody trusted it anymore. Prices had shot up because the quantity of money had gone up and the quality of money had gone down. If Diocletian really wanted to curb price inflation, he needed to improve the quality of the coinage and restore trust. But doing that would have required him to cut spending. And it is a very rare government official or leader or president or emperor that is ever willing to make real cuts in spending, Diocletian included. Instead, the preamble is full of moral outrage, targeting merchants and speculators and sidestepping the real culprit, a flooded money supply. It is a rhetorical dodge on the part of Diocletian, blaming people rather than his own policies. As the preamble carries on, Diocletian lays out the case for an edict on maximum prices. Quote, "We hasten, therefore, to apply the remedies long demanded by the situation, satisfied that no one can complain that our intervention with regulations is untimely or unnecessary, trivial or unimportant. These measures are directed against the unscrupulous, who have perceived in our silence of so many years a lesson in restraint, but have been unwilling to imitate it. For who is so insensitive and so devoid of human feeling that he can be unaware or has not perceived that uncontrolled prices are widespread in the sales taking place in the markets and in the daily life of the cities? Nor is the uncurbed passion for profiteering lessened either by abundant supplies or by fruitful years. It is our pleasure, therefore, that the prices listed in the subjoined schedule be held in observance in the whole of our empire. It is our pleasure that anyone who resists the measures of this statute shall be subject to a capital penalty for daring to do so." That's the preamble of Diocletian's edict on maximum prices. And then what follows in the edict is a schedule of maximum prices on a variety of goods. Foodstuffs like wheat and barley, beans, rice, wine, beer, oil, salt, meat of all sorts. Also wages, from unskilled labor to carpentry, painting, veterinary medicine, hair cutting, teaching, virtually all major goods and services are listed in the Edict of Maximum Prices. And again, Diocletian meant what he said. This edict truly was posted across the entire Roman Empire. This was not mere rhetoric. Diocletian really thought that it was possible to issue a command like this and see it adopted and see it work. This truly was a world devoid of even basic economic understanding. So that gets us to the big question. What happened? Well, what happens in the case of modern price ceilings? When anti-price gouging laws go into effect around the time of natural disasters, we see two big effects. One, if the prices of gas, for example, or water are not allowed to rise, people rush to the gas stations, take way more gas than they need. Some are able to escape or power generators, others are not. Gas stations have to put up signs saying they are out of gas and there's a major shortage. But the other thing that happens is there is no profit incentive now for people to bring gas in. If gas were allowed to go up to $10 or $20 a gallon, then people in neighboring states have a major incentive to fill up their trucks and tanks with gas at the low prices in their areas, drive that supply down to the affected area, and then sell it for a profit, alleviating the high demand in the region affected. But with a price ceiling, all of those incentives are gone. And so there is a delay in getting the necessary supplies to the region most affected by the natural disaster. Similarly, under Richard Nixon, to the extent that the wage and price controls were obeyed, those goods were not going to be brought to market. Why would people bring to market goods and services that they were not able to get a profit from? They were losing money. It made sense to hold them back. Well, the same thing happened under Diocletian. The fixed prices prevented the profits associated from bringing something to market. So instead, people stopped selling or they outright hid and hoarded goods. If people really needed to get around the price controls, they just avoided using money. They ditched coins for direct trades, undermining the monetary system even further. An eyewitness to what happened after the Edict on Maximum Prices was the Christian writer Lactantius. This is what he said, quote, "When by various evil deeds Diocletian caused a prodigious scarcity, he essayed by law to fix the prices of goods in the market. Then much blood was shed for trifling and paltry wares, and through fear nothing appeared in the market, so that the scarcity was made much worse, till after the law had ruined multitudes, it was of sheer necessity abolished." That's Lactantius in his work on the deaths of the persecutors. What Lactantius says here is undoubtedly true. Historians suspect that by around 305, just 4 years after the edict was implemented, it was in effect dead, widely ignored, unenforced, because it was so disruptive to the economy. And because Diocletian never addressed the actual causes of inflation and monetary distrust, prices continued to rise through the whole of his reign and would not be stabilized for several years until the monetary reforms of the Emperor Constantine. To me, the Edict on Maximum Prices is one of the many lessons in history cautioning against economic centralization and a command economy. There are, whether people like them or not, economic laws. They operate in all times and places, and they are ignored only at great peril. Diocletian, in his Edict on Maximum Prices, made the case that he was being compassionate and just by fixing prices. And in his mind, I'm sure that he was. I don't read the edict in a cynical way. But Diocletian was also ignorant. He found out that despite all of his power, all of his armies, the colossal statues of he and the other emperors, none of these things allowed him to subvert the most basic laws of supply and demand. Diocletian, however, had an excuse. Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, the works of great economists like Karl Menger, Friedrich Hayek, Milton Friedman, Ludwig von Mises had not yet appeared in history. So he had an excuse. Modern political leaders, however, have none. Price controls do not work. They never work. And price ceilings over the long term produce more shortages and more pain. Diocletian, as I said, learned that the hard way. But what about the rest of his reforms? How did those turn out, especially the Tetrarchy? As we'll see in the next episode, Diocletian was a true believer in what he was doing. And after 20 years of rule, he would be one of the few emperors in Roman history to abdicate, releasing rule to the next generation of rulers and expecting them to follow his system. But did they do that? We'll talk about it on the next episode of the Pax Romana podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Pax Romana podcast. For more information, including a list of primary sources and further reading, check the show notes. Music by Red Productions and Exocor. Follow Professor Colin Elliott on X at ProfCPE or email colin@paxromanapodcast.com. Listen to more episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or just about anywhere podcasts are available. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Pax Romana podcast.